I think the Americans have decided to take away those lines of cocaine export, and I think at the end it's beneficial for my own people in the sense that as much as drug trafficking is heated and affected, my country will receive less funding for criminals.
Welcome to the program. Thank you for coming and talking to me. Can I ask you first, what are your thoughts about these recent American attacks on boats in the Caribbean?
Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of drug trafficking has been increasing. The regime of Venezuela is allowing that to happen. And sadly, the president of my country, Petro, is not really fighting criminals, and by the way, has somehow aligned with Maduro's regime. So the consequence is that sadly, Colombia is becoming exposed and drug trafficking is becoming very prosperous. So I think the Americans have decided to take away those lines of cocaine export, and I think at the end it's beneficial for my own people in the sense that as much as drug trafficking is heated and affected, my country will receive less funding for criminals.
So, Ambassador, you feel the attacks on the boats by the US military, you consider those attacks are justified. They're controversial politically in the United States, but you back those attacks.
Well, they're very controversial, and any use of force, I can attest that. I've been a minister of defense. It's always difficult to make that choice and that decision. But I think that drug trafficking and terrorist structures are legitimate targets. And, the US has decided to use force against it. And I see that as much as that goes against drug traffickers and terrorist organizations is precisely and well accepted in the international humanitarian law.
Yeah.
So it makes sense.
Well, there are some, as you know, in Washington, D.C., who say you cannot necessarily call people involved, even in drug trafficking, terrorists. And international law, they argue, says that you can only attack a boat in international waters or outside your own waters if there's an imminent threat to the country concerned, a security threat. And they don't believe that a drug trafficking boat, if that's what they are, poses that threat. What do you say to that?
Well, it depends, and legal interpretations work on multiple ways. What I can tell is that as much as they are trying to fund terrorists that are killing people in my country, or a regime that is a narco regime as the one in Venezuela that is allowing human rights violations and killings of citizens, that has a very big connection between terrorism, crime, and the fact that drug is being moved in the Caribbean against, and for the purpose of benefiting criminals.
Right. Now, what about the argument then that the President Trump is exceeding his proper powers? He is seeking, well, for example, to remove Maduro of Venezuela and massing naval assets in the Caribbean for that purpose. Is that overstepping the mark from your point of view, or is that justified?
Well, let me remind you that the people that wanted to remove Maduro was the Venezuelan people, and they had elections, and those elections were clearly against Maduro, and he was defeated, but he decided to stay in power, and he's a dictator. And by the way, his dictatorship is funded by drug trafficking and organized crime internationally. So that's why it makes sense to consider multiple options to remove a regime like that is opposing his own people and honestly torturing his own nation. And by the way, with that, affecting a country like mine. Colombia is today subject of violence due to the fact that terrorist organizations are finding harbor in Venezuelan territory for many years, and from there attacking Colombians and doing all kinds of violence against our own people.
Yes. So on that basis, it is justified for America to act as a kind of a force for, literally, a force for democracy.
Well, at the end, democracy matters. We want to see a free world, and sometimes democracy needs, some help from, people that can bring law and order. And I think that's hopefully the intention in the case of what is going on in the Caribbean. And as much as that's so, we don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows, what kind of implications of those military assets will imply. But the truth is that is somehow responding to violations to human rights, to violations to democracy, to the will of Venezuelan people, and to the victims in Colombia that are victims today of terrorism and crime.
Okay, interesting. You do side strongly with President Trump and his supporters on this, and against those who think he's overstepping the mark. Just tell me a little bit more about Colombia, which is still, isn't it, a major supplier of drugs into the United States, and that's despite Colombian government policy to address the drug trade, including with support from America.
Well, it's very sad to see how my country was the most relevant and recognized country in the world as the country that fought cartels and drugs. And I can tell you, as Minister of Defense that I was, we were able to reduce production of cocaine and coca fields to the lowest in history for the year 2012 and 2013. But sadly, after the year 16, where spraying was stopped and really no real policy was put in place, and with the arrival of Petro to power, in which he has justified drug trafficking, allied, in some way with Maduro and his regime, Cartel de los Soles, which is a designated terrorist organization, and then allow Colombian criminals to have legal benefits with the logic of total peace, quote unquote, it has really put Colombia in a very difficult position. And today, sadly, Colombia has become again the largest producer. We are producing more cocaine than ever before. And that is funding terrorists, criminals, and is expanding crime into the whole country. So that's the bad news that we have. And that's somehow why the Colombia again is backwards to the idea that is a country that is allowing drug trafficking. Sadly, our military, which are very good fighters, and our police, they're really fighting for our people. They have confronted cartels in a very effective and determined way. Now, unfortunately, they have been weakened by President Petro himself. Actually, this week, he removed again the head of the National Police, that is the main organization that confronts drug trafficking. He dislikes when the police becomes very strong against criminals. And that's something that is, totally against the will to fight crime, and is creating a problem for Colombian people, which is the bad news. It's Colombian people now that is the one that is suffering.
And the Colombian people will suffer more, though, will they not, if President Trump goes ahead with a threat to not just cut aid, U.S. aid to Colombia, but impose really serious tariffs on trade?
Absolutely. And sadly, the responsible for this is Petro. Mr. Petro, the current president, has provoked all this. Instead of fighting drugs, instead of finding cooperation with the United States and the Western nations and democracies, he has been provoking all the time. He went to New York really as a provocateur, and really make a lot of activism inside the streets of New York against the United States and against its own government. So his really intention has been to break apart the relationship. He has an ideological perspective. He wants Colombia to be away from the West. That's what he really wants. And at the end, this is making now regular Colombians, citizens, suffer.
So, Ambassador, I fully understand your criticism of your president, Gustavo Petro. I understand your support for the action that the President Trump has taken, controversial though it is. But we're talking about the innocent people of Colombia and the businesses of Colombia who are going to be caught up in this, and they will be the ones to suffer. Do you not feel some sympathy for them?
I'm the one who feels the sympathy for them. I'm the one who's defending them. I'm here in Washington today speaking to the U.S. authorities to avoid tariffs for Colombia and to avoid any sanctions that can make Colombians suffer and make Colombians have a problem. The bad news is that the government of Colombia that is supposed to do that is not only not doing it, but is provoking these consequences for Colombian people. And that's why I'm here, to defend Colombians and to protect my own people.
All right. Ambassador, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Well, it's an honor, John. Thank you for the opportunity. My pleasure.
Bye-bye.